Today, Republicans are systematically and deliberately trying to stop millions of American citizens from voting. What part of democracy are they afraid of?
Hillary Clinton last Thursday, taking a few rhetorical swings at Republican governors. She says they're restricting the voting abilities for minority groups. Her accusations were met with counter-criticism from the governors she singled out, Chris Christie and Scott Walker, to name a couple. Also, Ohio Governor John Kasich speaking out against Mrs. Clinton, calling what she said demagoguery. For more, let's turn to John Fund. He joins us from Newsmax, New York. John, of course, Newsmax contributor and columnist for National Review Online. So Republicans cry foul, but what is the method to Hillary Clinton's seeming rhetorical madness, John?
Well, she is obviously looking at a Democratic base, especially in the African American community, that is not as committed to her as it is to Barack Obama. So this is a way of waving the bloody shirt, circling the wagons, making them all feel beleaguered, and saying that she identifies with their concerns. The sad thing is, this demagoguery goes against a long history we've had in this country of having election administration be relatively nonpartisan or bipartisan. The last major federal law, the Help America Vote Act, was co-sponsored by Chris Dodd and Chuck Schumer, along with many Republicans. And the whole point, according to Chris Dodd, who was one of its co-authors, was we want to make it both easy to vote and hard to cheat, and we can do both. Well, Mrs. Clinton claims that voter fraud doesn't exist, despite enormous evidence that it does, and that just the fact that it's so easy to commit without being detected means that we should tighten up our laws. I do notice, though, that in calling for 20 days of early voting and calling for automatic registration of people if they're on a government list of any kind, she didn't mention photo ID, which is an extremely popular method of combating voter fraud, and that's because it's supported by 75% of the American people, including clear majorities of blacks and Hispanics. So she's being very selective and very political in what she talked about in her messaging, and she knows that it can't go anywhere politically. It's not going to pass Congress. It wouldn't pass the courts because the states control elections and the federal government doesn't have the right to override them. So it's a purely partisan, political, rile up the base speech.
Our friend Phyllis Schlafly went so far in a recent column to say it's Hillary's plan to steal the election. Do you believe, aside from the rhetoric and the grievance mongering, she really has an MO to try and get those who are not registered voting somehow?
Well, yes, but she realizes her specific legislative proposals aren't going to pass before 2016. What she is doing, in coordination with her campaign lawyer, is supporting a whole bunch of lawsuits around the country to try to weaken existing voter protections. Things like lawsuits in Wisconsin, lawsuits in Ohio. And the lawsuit in Ohio is particularly rich because she's calling for 20 days of early voting, and Ohio has 27 days of early voting, leading the governor of Ohio to say, you know, maybe she should come here and answer some questions and learn something, rather than just, you know, at the 30,000-foot level, hurling spitballs.
Well, the other maxim in politics is this, John: if you're explaining, you're losing. And obviously, Mrs. Clinton doesn't want to explain anything about her emails. So is this attack also timed to not only try to throw some rhetorical red meat to her traditional base, but also to try and get past all the serious concerns about her own ethical misconduct, or that misconduct which is suspected?
Everything she does is to distract attention from what she doesn't want to talk about. Notice after this speech, she didn't take any questions.
And my question for you, quite simply, is this: how long can she get away without answering questions from the press?
Oh, indefinitely. The press will complain, the press will carp, the press coverage will be somewhat more negative than it otherwise would be, but it's a whole lot better than getting caught up in a gotcha game or constantly having to explain the latest scandal, of which, when it comes to the Clinton Foundation, there seems to be a new one every few days. So it's going to be an interesting experiment. This will be a candidate who, frankly, doesn't need any more name ID. She has 100% name ID. She has her nomination locked down. So for the next 9 or 10 months, she can ignore the gnats and the flies called Bernie Sanders and, Martin O'Malley, and she basically will just run as the incumbent. And even though she doesn't have an Oval Office and a Rose Garden, she'll act as if she does.
Well,
she already does have Secret Service protection.
That's true.
As a former First Lady.
Final 15 seconds. William McKinley ran a front porch campaign, I guess, around 1900. Is that what she's going to do in the 21st century?
No, Hillary's going to run a bunker campaign. She will barely come out of the bunker.
A bunker campaign. You heard it here first. John Funn, you have our thanks. We very much appreciate it. And there is more to come as Newsmax Prime continues here. Stay with us.